Oh, I've been a sea cook, and I've been a clipper man. I can sing, I can dance, I can walk a jib-boom. I handle a harpoon and I caught a fine figure whenever I find in a boat standing room. And we'll rant and we'll roar like Sag Harbor whalemen, rant and we'll roar on deck and below till we sight the Cedar Point light. Then straight up the channel to Sag Harbor we'll go. Hello, my name is Sanfilippo, and I am in front of the Horton Point Lighthouse on the north shore of Long Island, the North Fork of Long Island. The Horton Point Lighthouse was commissioned by George Washington. It was built in 1857, and about 200 feet in that direction over a bluff is Long Island Sound. About 100 miles in that direction is Manhattan Island, New York City. Long Island is about 120 miles in length. At its widest spot, it's about 23 miles. There are about 8 million people living on Long Island. We're in Suffolk County, which takes up the eastern 2/3 of Long Island. The county has about 1.4 million people, but out here on the North Fork, roughly the last 40 miles of Long Island, it's still fairly rural with small towns and farms. The songs I'm going to sing are about the sea or the bay or the ocean, but they are not shanties. They are not call and response work songs. Some of them are ballads. That is to say, they're very serious songs that tell a story. Others I would call ditties. They're not so serious, and they're intended more as entertainment. The oldest one I'll sing is from 1837, and I believe the newest one comes from the 1990s or early 2000s, although it describes an event that took place in the 1890s. So I'll talk a bit about the songs and Long Island as we're going along. This is a song called Round Cape Horn. It was collected in Bellport on the south shore of Long Island, about 45 miles west of here. Bellport is on a bay, and then there's a barrier island called Fire Island, and then on the other side of that narrow island is the Atlantic Ocean. Years from about 1830 into the early 1900s, especially in the heyday of whaling out of ports such as Sag Harbor on the South Fork of Long Island and Greenport here on the North Fork of Long Island, and with merchant ships, there were so many Long Islanders who were either whaling in the Pacific Ocean or on ships doing trade in the Pacific Ocean that if you asked, where is somebody, remembering that the population of the county at that time was probably under 10,000 people, the answer might often be, he's round Cape Horn. He's in the Pacific Ocean, round Cape Horn. I asked a young maid by my side, who sighed and looked at me forlorn, "Where is your love?" She quick replied, "Round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn. Where is your love?" She quick replied, "Round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn. Where is your love?" She quick replied, "Round Cape Horn." I said, "I'll let your fathers know the boys in mischief on the lawn." They all replied, "Then you must go round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn." They all replied, "Then you must go round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn. They all replied, then you must go round Cape Horn. In truth, I asked the little boy if he could tell where he was born. He answered with a mark of joy, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn. He answered with a mark of joy, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn. He answered with a mark of joy, round Cape Horn. Round Cape Horn, round Cape Horn, answered with a mark of joy, round Cape Horn. And the boy says I was born around Cape Horn, and that was true for people from Long Island and from New England, that many of the whaling captains would take their wives with them on these voyages that could last years, either in the China trade or to Japan after the 1850s, or even just to the Pacific coast of North America or the Pacific coast of South America. And especially the whaling voyages, which became increasingly long and often lasted from 3 to 5 years, even as many as 7 years. Landing, which is where the first English settlers came to Long Island in 1640. There's a lantern at the landing. There's a gleam off Paradise. So you're seeing the lantern off Paradise Point, which is a point of land that sticks out a bit into Southold Bay. So we decided, Susan and I decided, that this poem really needs to be sung, and we reworked a mid-19th century hornpipe called Off to California into the tune for Spearing Eels on Southold Bay. Oh, the times when we went eeling in the days of long ago. Ice had bound the channel and the shore lay 'neath the snow. When the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray, eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Times when we went eeling, when the ice had bound the channel and the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray. When the lonesome wintered forest raised its naked arms to pray, eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. And the hills of Shelter Island, when the night began to crawl, growing dim and dim and dimmer, till they weren't there at all, in the inky twilight blotted, curtained like an ended play, while the eel spears churned and mired up the mud of Southold Bay. Times when we went eeling, when the ice had bound the channel, and the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray. When the lonesome wintered forest raised its naked arms to pray, eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. There's a lantern at the landing, there's a gleam off Paradise, there's a window in the harbor like an old man's blinking eyes, like a half-seen shuttered glimmer, oh so lonesome far away from the clicking eel spears spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Times when we went eeling, when the ice had bound the channel and the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray. when the lonesome wintred forest raised its naked arms to pray, and eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. There's no moon to light the heavens, there's no stars to hang and glow, but the tortured bluish radiance of mirrored ice and snow cast a ghastly dimish luster, dregs of night, ghosts of day, or the darkened forms are spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Times when we went eeling, when the ice had bound the channel, and the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray, when the lonesome wintred forest raised its naked arms to pray, eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Not a breathing wind a stirring, not a dervish swirl of flake, not a sound except the booming when the frost cracks give and take, not a sound except the thunder of the tide floors giving way, and the dripping eel spears spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Times when we went eeling, when the ice had bound the channel, and the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray, when the lonesome wintred forest raised its naked arms to pray, eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Oh, the times when we went eeling in the nights of long ago, ice had bound the channel and the shore slept neath the snow. The leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray, and the eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Times when we went eeling, when the ice had bound the channel, and the leafless inky branches etched the sky of slaty gray, when the lonesome wintred forest raised its naked arms to pray, eel spears were spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. Eel spears spearing up the mud of Southold Bay. I eat eel every Christmas Eve. that's an old Italian custom, and a lot of the ethnic people here on the North Fork of Long Island still eat eel. And as we increasingly have folks from Central America and East Asia, they also eat eel. It's something delicious, although not particularly pretty to look at. One of the geographic features of Long Island, being an island that extends from, in the west, what's called the East River, which is actually not a river, it's a tidal channel between Manhattan Island and Long Island at the west end at Brooklyn. So it extends from Brooklyn to Montauk Point or to Orient Point, a distance of, depending on how you measure it, 120 miles, maybe a bit more. And at its widest, I think it's 23 miles. It averages out to being about 12 miles wide. There's places where it's only a few hundred feet wide. It has approximately 1,600 miles of coast. I know that sounds amazing, but you're coming out roughly 120 miles, then you've got around the South Fork, you're coming back in about 45 miles, then you're going out about 45 miles, then you're going back about 120 miles. But it's a very indented, very irregular coastline. It has a lot of bays. Added to that is that there's the barrier islands, the Fire Island, as it's called. And those islands have their own coastline on the ocean and on the bay. And then across the bay, there's the south shore of the main part of Long Island. And then on the other side, there's the shore, Sound Shore. And between the two forks, there's more bays. And then there's a lot of inlets. These are places where the tide comes in and then goes out. There's a beautiful one about 4 miles west of where we are right now called Goldsmith Inlet. It is a beautiful tidal basin. The tide rushes in, it fills the basin, and then 6 hours later, 5.5 hours later, it's rushing out again. So there's many places like that. There's a large inlet about, 12 miles west of here called Mattatuck Inlet that has all kinds of little arms in it and a rather wide opening. Shinnecock Inlet, Moriches Inlet. There's inlets into Jamaica Bay, which is part of the south side of New York City, of Queens County. So it's got this. Then there's a lot of little rivers that are navigable for 5, 10, 15 miles. In other words, if you were trying to patrol the coast of Long Island, as the British did during the American Revolution and during the War of 1812, you would find that these Long Islanders had all sorts of places to hide boats, to get in and out of, to get in with small boats at low tide that a larger boat couldn't get in after them. And then added on to that, we've got just across the Sound, I believe at this point it's about 10 miles, is Connecticut with another very irregular coastline. Where is this leading? The United States in the early 1900s established prohibition of alcohol. It became illegal to manufacture, transport, or sell alcoholic beverages in the United States. So from 1918 until that was repealed by from the 18th Amendment to the 21st Amendment. I hope I'm getting them right. After all, I am a college professor of history. It repealed in 1933. So there was this time period where alcoholic beverages were illegal in the United States, but that wasn't stopping people from drinking. One of the ways of getting alcohol was to make it yourself. Moonshine, bathtub gin, bathtub beer, all these kind of things. But there was also very high-grade alcoholic beverages brought into the country illegally through the Gulf of Mexico, of course, onto the West Coast and on the East Coast of the United States. With the huge population center of New York City and its metropolitan area into Connecticut and New Jersey, Long Island became an important place for what was called rum running. Alcoholic beverages might be made in Europe and then transported to Canada, or made in Canada and then brought down the coast to perhaps the coast of Maine, Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And a very good place for rum running was Long Island because it offered so many geographic opportunities for it and so close to a big population center with the demand for it. It was done very much with sailing vessels. And Long Islanders would then go out. You didn't want to use a motorized vessel because then the revenue agents would hear it and they could come and get you. But you'd go out with a small sailing vessel, a small sloop, perhaps a 45-foot sloop with one sail, one fore and aft sail, called a sloop. And go out, and there'd be a rendezvous point that was set up, unload cases of Canadian whiskey or Irish whiskey, and then go into these small harbors of Long Island. So that's what this song is about. Going back to Ealing, though, I should say that there was an interesting case on Great South Bay where a revenue boat was chasing a rum running boat, and the rum runner threw his crates of whiskey overboard. And then a fellow who had eel traps was pulling the eel traps, and he wound up pulling out cases of whiskey. So this is called Since Prohibition Came. It was written probably 85 years ago, I believe actually after Prohibition ended, by a wonderful poet from Amityville, the southwest corner of Suffolk County. A man named Paul Bailey, who I believe Paul was born about 1880, and he was an historian, he was a journalist, he had his fingers into many different things, very interesting fellow. And he wrote local poems, but there was something about Paul Bailey's poems that captured something about the character of Long Islanders, especially of people who lived and worked on or near the water. So this is Paul Bailey Since Prohibition Came. I've reworked his words a bit. I think I even added a verse, though I don't remember which one. And I sing it to the tune of an English drinking song, slightly changed again, which I believe is called When Johnson's Ale Was New. This is called The Folk Process. Long Island sure has changed a lot since Prohibition came. It's not the same old solemn spot since Prohibition came. The fishermen go out at night, they even fish when fish don't bite. And all the crews are in their tights since Prohibition came. Since Prohibition came, Long Island's not the same. It's not the same old solemn spot since Prohibition came. Old baymen with rheumatic strife since Prohibition came have found a brand new lease on life since Prohibition came. And boats laid up since 1903, re-rigged and corked up handsomely, sail out to breast the wintry sea since Prohibition came. Since Prohibition came, Long Island's not the same. It's not the same old solemn spot since Prohibition came. No more we go out on the trawls since Prohibition came. And lobster traps ain't all we haul since Prohibition came. The fishermen show no regrets to lay aside long lines and nets. They've started fishing for the wets since Prohibition came. Since Prohibition came, Long Island's not the same. It's not the same old solemn spot since Prohibition came. No more we catch striped bass and cod since Prohibition came. No more we catch bluefish and scrod since Prohibition came. These fish from Canada up north, boiled down into a potent broth, will ease your aches and cure your cough since Prohibition came. Since Prohibition came, Long Island's not the same. It's not the same old solemn spot since Prohibition came. Since Prohibition came, most of it by the great Long Island poet Paul Bailey. And I should add the wets. They've started fishing for the wets during Prohibition. Those who favored keeping Prohibition were called the dries. They were dry. And those who wanted to repeal Prohibition and go back to having alcoholic beverage were called the wets. So they started fishing for the wets. Here's another Paul Bailey poem. It describes that Susan and I said to music. It describes an incident that took place out near Montauk Point at the extreme east end of Long Island on the South Fork. In the year 1895, the steam freighter Georgia Pold was sailing south from, I believe, Rhode Island, heading towards, I believe, Norfolk, Virginia, with a cargo of shoes. And along the way, it ran into a storm, and it was wrecked off Montauk, right up on the shore. It came. The ship was destroyed. People survived. But the cargo, as the ship broke up, got washed up on the shore, and it was in cases, and the cases got broken up. So for a couple of miles, the shore was scattered with shoes. Of course, the shoes were of different sizes and perhaps different styles. So local people went down, and this was at a time when Montauk was extremely isolated. And this is during a winter storm, so it was really isolated. People went down, they engaged in what was sometimes called wrecking, which is a form of looting the cargo. It was illegal, but they did it. They got the shoes, but maybe you picked up 40 shoes, but none of them were your size. And maybe you wound up with one of your size, but the left shoe of your size, but you didn't have the right shoe of your size. So people had to find other people who had the shoe they needed to match up. And Paul Bailey wrote this that Susan and I set to music, called Shoes from the Sea. It was a boisterous night off Montauk Light in 1889. Breakers crashed, a beacon flashed across the windswept Rhine. High in the air, a rocket's flare, and a freighter's horn was heard. Above the gale, like the dying wail of a mythological bird. It sounded the fate of an ancient crate, the steamer Georgia Pold, as she came to grief on the rocky reef that shadowed a forward hold. The morning light revealed to sight what was a ship no more. Timbers battered and the cargo scattered along the rock-bound shore. But in spite of the gale and the rain and the hail that swept the east end bluff, the natives gathered all hot and lathered to cart away the stuff. It was a mighty haul, enough for all, something they all could use. For the sand and the surf and the nearby tuff were covered with leather shoes. There were shoes galore upon the shore in assorted styles of leather, but the undertow had scattered them, so there wasn't a pair together. All hands worked, nobody shirked, loading them into sacks, straining their hearts to fill the carts or toting them on their backs. And after the raid, a big parade struggled through muck and mire, heading for home with no aplomb, but plenty of foot attire. It was a happy throng that trudged along over the muddy sod, for there were some of them, by gum, who'd never before been shod. And many a day down East End Way was spent in fitting shoes, trying on spares to match up pairs, discovering who had whose. The fish and smacks lay limp and lax where the fishermen had quit 'em, for who would wish to go for fish in shoes that did not fit 'em? It took nearly a year for things to clear after the episode, and even then there were women and men walking around pigeon-toed. And to this day down East End Way you'll hear the tale retold, how they got confused before the shoes from the wreck of the Georgia Pold. A true story. There was also material, bolts of cloth in the wreck that were described as ugly calico, and they were saved, and people made clothing out of it, and eventually some were made into quilts, and they're called uphold quilts. There are a few of them that remain, and they've become quite valuable. But that is a true story of shoes from the sea. The story here is that a schooner is coming north from Baltimore to New York, and it gets blown way off course in an extremely powerful storm in winter. The schooner, the vessel, runs aground about 100 yards offshore. So it strikes bottom. It can't get to the shore. It's stuck there. And there's this tremendously powerful storm. It begins to break the vessel into pieces. It's a wooden vessel. The men on the vessel can't get ashore. The life-saving people from the U.S. Life-Saving Service, the surfmen, come, and they've got large rowboats that they can try to get out to the vessel with, but the storm is so bad that they can't get out to it, even though it's only a few hundred feet away. So they begin to fire what's called a Lyle gun, which is a rather sophisticated rope line that is shot out of a small cannon, and it's got a hook on the end. You shoot it into the rigging of the vessel. It hangs in the vessel, and the people on the vessel can then come down the line to get ashore. So that is what's going on here. The captain's name is William Squires, and he is buried here in Southold. It's told from the point of view of the only survivor, a German seaman named Klaus Stuven, who later became somewhat a celebrity. That's not exactly the word that I should use, but he came known for being the only survivor of this horrible wreck. There's not really much loss of life. Everybody aboard, and I think it's only about a dozen people, dies except for Klaus Stuven. It's the horror of the event that's so striking, and that Susan tries to capture, and captured quite well in the ballad that she wrote. Klaus Stuven then had photographs taken, and he actually sold postcards. And postcards were sold of him. Eventually, he went back to Germany. I was a young seafaring man. Klaus Stuven is my name. I sailed the seas for 15 years. From Germany I came. I'm worn out now and cannot work. Ein Matros ans Leben schwer. I'll tell you the tale of a winter gale for a glass of schnapps or beer. Ein Matros ans Leben schwer. Plattdeutsch meaning a sailor's life is hard. If I live to be an old man with a beard and withered hands, I may recall the girls I met in Hamburg or Newfoundland, but I'll not forget my mother's love or my father's parting speech, or the awful storm that winter's morn off Long Island's great South Beach. The blowing wind, the blinding snow, the icy, biting cold had sealed our fate as to the frozen rigging we grabbed hold. Our loved ones knew not of our end, or how we may have died. 'Twas on the schooner V Place, we said our sad goodbyes. From Baltimore to New York town, our captain's course was set. He was a man of wit and skill, bravest seaman you never met. But he was no match for the storm that blew our ship upon the shore and tore the timbers from the deck and our bodies from our souls. The surfmen of the Lone Hill crew, they tried their level best to launch their boats with all good speed for the Coleman's crest. They shot the lines a dozen times, but we could not reach the rope. When the captain fell from the mizzen mast, we then gave up all hope. Joby, Allen, and Morrison all fell into the sea. Fritz Mott had died to fight, but hung on silently. It was just Nielsen and I then left to die, too cold to even pray. As the watchfires died and the waters calmed and night turned into day. Klaus Stuyven survived 5 shipwrecks. This was the one he said was by far the worst. 5 times I thought my life was done. 5 times I reached the shore. Mein Mutter's fears und Lieblings tears, I'll try their faith no more. If I get home and see their faces smiling back at me, I'll stay at home and cause no pain and never go back to sea. But life will never be the same for Captain Squire's wife. She'll no more meet him at the dock or kiss him in his life. Her children will not know his laugh, his whistle, or his song. He's at his rest in the land beyond, where man can do no wrong. I am an old seafaring man. Klaus Stuyven is my name. I sailed the seas for 15 years. From Germany I came. I'll not forget my mother's love, nor my father's parting speech, nor that awful storm that winter's night off Long Island's great South Beach. Several years ago, I guess it's probably close on to 20 years ago, there was a terrible airplane disaster off the south shore of Long Island in which well over 100 lives were lost. And in talking about that disaster, it was interesting to see that the wreck of the Louis V. Place was also referenced. It, again, was not that there was a great loss of life The loss of everybody but one on the vessel. But it was that you're looking at this, you're standing on the shore and you see the schooner off about 300 feet, and there's absolutely no way of getting those men ashore to safety. And watching them in the rigging, freezing to death, and one by one falling into the sea. Actually, Nielsen also survived and died within hours afterwards. I'll end with one last song. It's, I suppose, a particular favorite of mine, as are all of these songs. It's called Isle of Beauty. I found it in the whaling journal of a man named Henry A. Harlow from Sag Harbor, New York, great whaling port on the South Fork. I guess Sag Harbor is, as the crow flies, about 20 miles from here. He was 17 when he signed as a green hand, inexperienced, aboard a Sag Harbor whale ship called the Acasta in October of 1847 for a voyage that was supposed to take 2 years in the Pacific. 20 months into the voyage, he wrote the following into his journal. And I should point out that there was an extremely high literacy rate among Long Island and New England, and really the east end of Long Island might be considered as a part of New England. Among the seafarers, there was a very high literacy rate, and many of them wrote quite eloquently, as you will hear with this little piece that I'll read from Henry A. Harlow's journal, written probably at the age of 18 or just about when he was turning 19. He put this down into his journal, and at another point in his journal, he wrote into the journal the words to a song called Isle of Beauty, Fare Thee Well, which I later found out was an English song written about 1840 that he heard at sea. And he personalized it by writing the words, Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Henry A. Harlow. How heavy time hangs on one's hands today. No work, no reading, or nothing but what we have read over and over again. The mind becomes stagnated, tired of the monotonous routine of ideas which return to it again and again as if for new life. At such times, how fondly the heart turns toward home, its Sabbath bells, and 1,000 hallowed associations which fond memory brings to light. But here we are on a wide waste of water with nothing to relieve the eye, no sound to relieve the ear except the creaking of the ship, which seems to be floating on a sea of glass, far from home and friends and all that can make life happy. If we could have a prospect of soon reaching home, it would be a great relief. But the heart is pained by the dark uncertainty of its fondest hope being realized. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Shades of evening close not o'er us, leave our lonely bark a while. Morn, alas, will not restore us yonder dim and distant isle. Still my fancy can discover sunny spots where friends may dwell. Dark a shadow hover round us, Isle of Beauty, fare thee well. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. 'Tis the hour when happy faces smile around the table light. Who will fill our vacant places? Who will sing our songs tonight? Through the mist that floats above us, faintly sounds the vesper bell, like a voice from those who love us, breathing fondly, fare thee well. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. When the waves are round me breaking, and I pace the deck alone, and my eye in vain is seeking some green leaf to rest upon, what would I not give to wander where my old companions dwell? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Isle of Beauty, fare thee well, sweet Long Island, goodbye. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed our little musical journey into the history and folk culture of maritime Long Island. And I could think of no better way of ending than saying, sweet Long Island, goodbye.